My name is Joe Laloon, and welcome to the Three Phase Podcast. Today we're talking wearables and whether they are worth it or a waste of time. We're going to dive deep on different types of wearables, the pros and cons, and the psychological aspects that go into wearing technology on yourself. And we'll break down who should be wearing tech and for what purposes. This episode is brought to you by threephasefitness.ca. You can head there to check out all of our services, episodes, and content that should help you improve your overall health, fitness, and strength. Also, before we jump in today, I wanted to thank everyone who participated in the Instagram poll, who provided great insight and feedback and showed that there was an interest in this subject. And that's why we're making this podcast episode today, to really dive deep on this subject and provide as much information, content, and feedback as we can so that you can take it and apply it to your daily needs. And in this particular circumstance, decide if rocking a wearable is the right thing for you and your goals to get you there faster, more efficiently, and avoiding the data trap if that's something that you might get caught up in. Without any further delay, let's dive into the podcast.
The Three Phase Podcast is starting now.
Wearable technology has obviously gained a massive surge in popularity in the last decade especially, but even more so in the last 3 to 5 years. And the main purpose people are wearing technology is to monitor physical attributes like heart rate and steps. It's also one of the most common things clients ask me is if they should be wearing one, whether it's an Apple Watch, a Whoop, a Fitbit, an Oura Ring, whatever that technology is. There always seems to be questions around that. And that's why I wanted to dive into this podcast episode today and break down some of those pros and cons in terms of like why someone should actually be rocking a wearable and why they might actually want to avoid wearables altogether. So let's quickly define what wearables are. I know a lot of people are aware of them, but just to break down the specifics, wearable technology refers to electronic devices or accessories that are worn on the body, typically in the form of clothing, accessories, or embedded within items like watches and eyewear. These devices are equipped with sensors, processors, and connectivity features, allowing them to collect and transmit data about various aspects of the user's body and environment. Wearable technologies are designed to enhance and augment daily activities, providing features such as tracking physical attributes like heart rate and steps, monitoring health parameters, enabling communication, providing notifications, and integrating with other devices or applications. They're often used to promote wellness, fitness, convenience, and connectivity in users' daily life. And I would say the most popular one on the market is the Apple Watch, though there are dozens available that do very similar things. Let's break down the pros for wearing technology. So first is convenient tracking. Obviously, these wearable devices are going to give you real-time monitoring for these physical attributes like we talked about, like heart rate and steps. A lot of them will go a bit further and give you more information or more insight in terms of how your body is performing on a daily basis. Ideally, we're getting feedback on things like sleep, respiratory rate, heart rate, resting heart rate, active heart rate. All those kind of things are very important if we're starting to break down that information and apply it to making progress. The next big pro is health awareness. Wearables will help promote health consciousness by reminding users to stay active and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Even just having it on your wrist or on your finger or on your chest, you're going to be aware that that thing is there. You're going to see it throughout the day as you're going through regular activities. And it's going to remind you that you need to be active. You need to get moving. You need to take the steps instead of the elevator. You need to get up throughout the day and move around. You need to get to the gym at the end of the day. And generally speaking, this is a good thing for most people to help reinforce those habits. Tracking of data also helps individuals identify patterns, help set achieve targets, and make informed decisions for overall well-being. So if we start to see things like throughout the day we get sluggish, and right around that time our device buzzes and reminds us that we should get up and get walking, we'll start to identify these patterns faster that in that example, we need to get up, move more regularly throughout the day, especially if we find ourselves sitting or becoming sedentary. This might be the biggest game changer for most people is just awareness. For most people, they don't even really recognize that they've been sitting for 6 hours straight, or they didn't get their workout in that day, or they didn't close the loop on their activity. And this might go on for a long period of time. So one thing that the wearables does is just brings more awareness to these things that we actually want to change. And for everything that we want to change, it really starts with tracking. If we're not tracking it, it's going to be very hard to even identify that there is a change that needs to happen. So a way to get to that a little bit faster is with these wearable tech. A next pro is motivation and accountability. So wearables act as motivators, encouraging individuals to be more physically active and achieve fitness goals. So as much as friends, colleagues, coaches are there to help keep you accountable and keep you motivated and keep you moving forward, having this wearable tech right on your arm is going to be with you pretty much all the time, 24/7. And it may just serve as a reminder to stay engaged in being more physically active throughout your day. And if we've set good quality fitness goals, it may serve as a reminder to keep working towards those goals each day. A lot of the tech has a social feature tied into it as well, such as sharing achievements, competing with friends, creating a sense of accountability, and enhanced motivation. I do think this is a great way to help get people more engaged in the activity that they're doing. And for a lot of people who are just building, it helps to have community engaged with you. Whether they're doing the exact same thing or something different, you're at least consistently seeing other people achieving their goals, whether it's a step goal or a distance goal that they're trying to run or walk, or it's achieving even workouts or personal bests. Those are also really great drivers that are going to help people stay more engaged for longer, staying accountable to what they're trying to achieve because they're seeing others in their community achieving their goals as well. I do also like the idea of gamifying fitness. Fitness is supposed to be enjoyable and fun, and to have some gamified competition involved in that, I do think it makes it a little bit more engaging and a bit more enjoyable, especially if it's something that is new for you. It's a new habit and you're just trying to figure this all out. Maybe you don't have that intrinsic motivation to just get the workout done, or you need the external accountability to do the workout. I think the gamification of that is a great way to do that. Next is performance optimization. So athletes and fitness enthusiasts can use wearables to monitor their physical performance during workouts or training sessions. Now, what this does is provides up-to-date feedback on the things like your heart rate, your training zones, the time it takes for you to recover back to baseline. You may also include distance if we're trying to do, run a distance for time, as an example. In sports like soccer, people are wearing wearables to track distances run in a training session, acceleration times, total speed or average speed of running. And this is giving a huge insight into the data and information that may help an athlete improve overall. And this is across the board for different sports and different athlete types, that they're using some type of technology to give feedback to see if there are ways that they can improve their training, whether it's in volume of training, intensity of training, frequency of training. There's going to always be ways to use that data and apply the information to make adjustments to get the most out of that athlete. And what's really cool about it is that it's individualized, right? So you have two athletes who are running the same practice, run the same amount of drills. One is going to have one outcome. The second one is going to have potentially a totally different outcome. And depending on that, you may make more individualized adjustments so that we're not just throwing the same spaghetti against the wall to both athletes. Now we know more individually what we can do as protocols to help that person recover faster, to have a better performance the next time they're out. And this is where we start to see bigger changes in team sports, especially because we're being more individualized in our approach per athlete. And this is even where you see in sports like the NBA, which does have a lot of controversy around it, is managing playing time. So a lot of the old school guys are saying, like, we used to play whatever X amount of games and we played banged up and we just, keep going at it. And now we're seeing these big name athletes sitting out of games because the staff is managing their training time or competition time. And so this is sort of where we start to get into some of the cons of wearable technology and all of that data, is that we want to see if the information, the data from the wearable is actually dictating how we're playing or approaching a sport or physical activity or daily activity levels. there may be some nuance that goes into that in terms of how we're deciding when to let technology dictate whether we perform or not. So we'll get into that more, but let's start diving into some of the cons of wearables, and we'll double back on that. So one of the most common cons that I hear about with wearables is data accuracy. And this is something that I've had conversations with clients about, where they're frustrated because they're looking at this feedback or outcome out of a workout and thinking like, there's no way, based on how hard this workout was, that I only achieved X amount of calories, or there's no way my heart rate is only at 110 beats per minute. It feels like it's at 180, things along those lines. So some wearables are definitely better than others. Unfortunately, that usually comes down to price of the device and how close it is to your heart. So wearables on the wrist generally are not the most accurate. I mean, same thing with the Oura ring. You wear that on your finger. If we're looking for most accurate heart rate, that's going to be found in a device worn around the chest, something that is specifically a heart rate monitor. Typically, though, these type of devices don't have more than that function. So if we want to get daily data throughout the day, data throughout the sleep, that's not really something that you're going to be wearing all the time. But for those sports specific and fitness enthusiast types, throwing on a chest monitor while you're doing the activity is going to give you the most accurate feedback that you can get. We just have to take the information with a grain of salt, understanding that there's going to be some variability of precision with the information, and just know that it's collecting some data. It's collecting more data than you would get without it. And that's probably positive and beneficial, but just know that it may not be perfectly accurate. This is also why if you're looking at like a lab where they're looking at heart rate or something like that, they're going to use devices that are going to be a lot more precise. They're going to have multiple data points, so maybe something around the wrist, something on the finger, something at the chest, so that they can compare multiple data sources. But I mean, obviously for the average user, this is not something that you're going to want to be doing, going for a run with something on your finger, wrist, and chest. So, just understanding that and knowing that the reliability of the data may not be as accurate as we think it's going to be. But I know like a lot of those new devices like the Whoop 4.0, the new Apple Watch, they are putting lots of like effort and technology into improving those so that they are more accurate more often. The next con, which we tapped on with the MBA related things, is dependency and addiction. So this constant reliance on wearables for monitoring physical attributes can lead to dependence and addiction. And this is something that is definitely important to touch on, especially for people who get really obsessed with numbers, right? So this is very commonly seen with like the weight scale. Someone who's checking it multiple times in the day, they get really caught up with that. And they think that, any small adjustment is going to have this like really big impact on their daily weight. This is also really common when people start getting into tracking food. They're tracking every single micro ounce, trying to make sure that they're doing their best. But ultimately, this is an addictive trait, and it's not something we really want to encourage. So for people who have that tendency, this is maybe the type of person that should not be wearing a wearable technology if it is going to lead to more of those addictive type of behaviors. Ultimately, that's going to be taking away from the overall desired outcome. You may become overly obsessed with achieving daily targets. This could potentially cause stress and anxiety when targets are not met. And ultimately, what we're trying to do with improving overall health, fitness, and performance is to reduce stress markers. So if we're adding something in that's going to create more stress overall, we're starting to move backwards. So that's something to be aware of for those people who are really concerned or addicted to numbers and goals and trying to achieve that every single day and only focusing on that. I think it's also good to mention for some people, privacy concerns. Obviously, wearable technologies are collecting personal health data, and that can raise concerns about privacy and data security. Unauthorized access to sensitive information can have serious consequences. And if that falls into the wrong hands, whatever, they could do things that you may not want them to do with that information. I do think there is a positive thing when people opt in for sharing this type of information. Like I remember during COVID, I was wearing the Whoop at that point, and they had asked people if they would opt into daily journaling, and they had a whole questionnaire that you could go through each day based around like symptoms and energy level. And then if you did contract COVID, there was questions that were about whatever taste, smell, energy, sleep quality, obviously collecting all that data. And they were able to put together some information that was way faster than what was happening aside from that, right? The other thing with that too is that it really felt like you were engaged in trying to come up with a solution, which I thought was really interesting. I remember hearing a story too, like because they were collecting data so quickly and they were able to digest it. There's a PGA player who, based on a change in his regular respiratory rate, the app actually suggests that he go get tested, and it turned out that he had contracted COVID, and it saved, him getting on a plane, traveling alongside other PGA players, and he was able to get, whatever help he needed in advance of symptoms actually showing up. So I thought that was a really cool thing with data collection and sort of the positive side of that. But it could have privacy concerns, especially if that is something that you are personally concerned about. Next is social comparison. We did talk about this as a positive trait of wearables, that it creates a sort of gamification, it creates competitiveness, but there's always a con that goes along with that. And the social comparison, constantly comparing one's physical attributes with others, especially through social features, may lead to negative self-perception and self-esteem issues. And that kind of unrealistic comparisons can create feelings of inadequacy, discourage individuals from maintaining a healthy relationship with their bodies. And so I think we just got to be conscious of that we're not creating sort of like these false comparisons or comparing for the wrong reasons. Like if we're gamifying it and we're having fun with it and we're being competitive, that's one thing. But then when we start getting into this negative spiral of, oh, so-and-so is doing so much better than I am, or I should be doing more, that type of talk, just something that we want to break as a habit early so that we're not getting into that point where it becomes this negative effect. And it goes back to the same idea of, with improving health and fitness, we don't want to incur additional stress. And this may be one of those situations where we're actually adding in more stress and we're moving backwards because of that. The next one that we want to look at is the psychological aspects of wearables. So self-monitoring and self-awareness. Wearables promote self-monitoring. They encourage individuals to be more aware of their physical health and habits. And this increased self-awareness can empower individuals to make positive life changes and take control of their well-being. So this is kind of like what I was very first talking about, is that it's very hard or impossible to make change with something that you're not aware of. But the wearable helps bring awareness to the daily habits that you have. So whether it's walking a certain amount, eating a certain amount of food, getting a certain amount of exercise and activity, getting quality sleep, all those habits go into play into making you healthier. And if we can become aware of them, then we can start to make better choices. And I'll give a bit of a story for myself. When I started wearing the Whoop, or before that, I had really terrible sleep habits. And usually what I would do is I would create so much pressure to get to sleep early so that I could get quality sleep, so that I could wake up, so that I could train the next day. And typically what would happen is when I would try to go to sleep and I wouldn't fall asleep quickly, I would create this stress and pressure. Okay, I have to go to sleep. I have to fall asleep now. And when I wouldn't fall asleep, it would lead to this negative pressure cycle of I have to fall asleep. But because it had added stress, I wouldn't fall asleep. And that would continue. And that would be maybe like hours of doing that before I would actually fall asleep. And it was mostly because I had built up this pressure that I had to get quality sleep in order to perform the next day. What the Whoop taught me, by giving me feedback, it actually showed me that, hey, when you go to bed at even as late as 11 o'clock, your quality of sleep between 11 and 7 a.m. is high enough that you're getting good recovery to go back in and have another great performance. So that right there for me just took so much pressure off of getting to sleep early. And then by relieving that pressure, when I went to go to sleep, I would actually fall asleep a lot easier, knowing that like, hey, if I don't fall asleep in the next 15 minutes, it's not a big deal. I've got this window from 9:30 p.m. to 11 to fall asleep. And if I fall asleep within that hour and a half, I'm still going to have good recovery and a good performance the next day. But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't have that information and feedback, and probably would still be in this sort of negative pressure loop of trying to fall asleep, not being able to fall asleep, falling asleep much later, having a lower quality sleep, and having a low quality performance the next day. So that's part of information feedback that is a positive thing. And once you start to see these habits that either work well or work poorly for you, you can start to make those changes. And that's really empowering to be able to now take control of your own lifestyle changes without someone having to necessarily come in and analyze your day-to-day activities. You're going to start to see those things and make those changes for yourself. And you'll be way more bought into them. You know, when someone tells you to do something, the likelihood that you do it is pretty low. If you learn something for yourself, the likelihood that you do it is going to be much higher. And this is exactly one of those scenarios where you're learning for yourself to make your own improvements, and you're going to be way more engaged in those improvements. So another great feature with the psychological aspect of wearables is goal setting and achievement. So setting goals and achieving them through wearables can enhance self-esteem and provide a sense of accomplishment. And this gets tied into the gamification of it. You know, if you use a Nike Run Club app and you go for a run and that run finishes and you know, the coach's voice comes on and says, "Great job, you completed another run." You get a gold star. The thing dings positively. It creates this dopamine rush. You know, your friends comment on that, letting you know you did a great job. So this is a great way to tie in goal setting, building self-esteem through your accomplishments, and those kind of things all tied together help and encourage you to do more of that. However, unrealistic and excessively challenging goals may lead to disappointment and demotivation. Now, we can see this outside of wearables as well. Obviously, we want to set, you know, some realistic goals, you know, whether you subscribe to SMART goals or, you know, whatever else. Setting yourself up to be successful is also important, and just having a better understanding of how to make incremental changes over longer periods of time will help build you closer to that goal every single week. Next one, behavioral change and habit forming. Obviously, like we've touched on, wearable technologies can assist in creating new habits by providing feedback, reminders, and incentives. So like some of those pros we talked about, you know, if you're someone who's sedentary throughout the day and your device gives you a buzz every, you know, hour or 2 hours to get up and get moving, this is a great way to start building those reminders to get you moving, to get you to drink water. And the more you feel that feedback loop, the more likely you are to build a positive habit. And over time, individuals may develop healthier routines and maintain long-term behavior changes, right? So if we're reinforcing a behavioral change with positive feedback, we're way more likely to have that habit stick around. Now, psychological stress and burnout. So excessive focus on meeting daily targets or consistently monitoring physical attributes can lead to stress and burnout. And this is sort of what we're talking about with, you know, these athletes or individuals in the gym who are really relying on that device, the information from that device to make decisions. So if, you know, our device is telling us like, you're good to go today, but you maybe feel like you had a poor sleep or you had excessive stress that day, or, you know, you just don't have enough time and you're rushing through your workout. If the device is dictating when we should work out, we're probably missing the mark. We need to have a better conversation with ourselves, a better understanding of when to go or when to shut it down. And I think it goes the same way on the other side, that there are days where the feedback from a device is maybe saying like you should pull back today, but it might be a day where you feel really good. And maybe that's the day that you make that progress on your squat or your deadlift or your run. And so if we're letting the device dictate when we go and when we don't, again, we're sort of missing the mark. We got to have a better conversation with ourselves, have a better understanding of how our body is feeling and how we're mentally feeling on that day as well, and make a decision we can obviously include the information that we're getting from a wearable tech into that decision. But ultimately, we got to really just check in with ourselves and see if we're ready to go on that day or if we need to pull back and kind of shut it down a little bit. And this is the debate, especially in the NBA right now, where they're having these high-level, big-name guys sit out of games because they're monitoring their, miles run in training sessions and games. They're monitoring time on the floor. They're monitoring number of jumps, right? So they're looking at all this data. And of course, they're trying to make an informed decision to make sure that they're not burning out their star. And, they've got 40 games left in their schedule or something like that. And they're trying to keep them healthy, keep them highly energized so that they can perform as best as possible on, the games where they're actually playing. But, you get a lot of older school guys who are commenting on this and them saying, they were playing a much tougher version of the sport. They played every minute that they possibly could. They were frustrated if they got pulled out of the game and had to sit on the bench. So it's definitely different mentalities, obviously like wanting to instill toughness and kind of, go for it and don't hold back is one approach. And you see that a lot in the gym too. Like, again, a bit more old school, like, no pain, no gain, that type of mentality where it's like, just show up and do the work. That is definitely one approach. The other side of this is like, if we really go to the super analytical side of things where people are, maybe they set a really low threshold on how many miles you could run before you needed to take an extended break. Maybe we're not pushing the envelope as much as possible, and there's room to actually get more out of an athlete or yourself as an individual, and we're just being held back by technology and information. There's definitely a sweet spot in the middle of those two things where a lot of progress happens kind of on the edge of that all or nothing. And but a lot of like injury prevention also happens in the middle there too, where we're not overextending ourselves. So it's another one of those situations where it all depends. Obviously, it always all depends. But there are definitely days where I think an athlete or an individual where you're going to show up, maybe it's the day that you've been training for, you're going to run a marathon on that day, or maybe you're a football player and you got a big game on Sunday. Those are the days when you don't have a choice. You got to do your sport. You got to show up. You got to perform at your best. And if we're looking at information from technology, the likelihood that that holds us back is pretty high. If we get information on one of those days and it says like, oh, you had a bad sleep, your recovery is not good, you're in the red, and anything along those lines, well, what's that going to do for your psyche when you go and step out on the field, right? You're going to know that in the back of your head. Oh man, I should have had a better sleep. Oh, I should have deloaded earlier. Oh, I shouldn't have trained so hard for so long. And then you're going to go into that sport, a bit handicapped and thinking, I'm not ready to perform at my best. Now, maybe we could fudge the numbers of the information and tell an athlete, hey, dude, you're in the green, you're ready to go, you had the best possible sleep, you recovered at 100%. Today's your day, you're going to absolutely crush it. Maybe some coaches do that to, have a little bit of a psychological edge for that athlete, but we just don't want to be inundated with information to a point where it psychologically affects on those days, those performance days, how we are going to perform as individuals. So again, it's that sweet spot of maybe a couple days out from that competition, we're not looking at that information anymore, or maybe the coach is looking at it, in the background just to manage volume and intensity of the workouts. But there's definitely a time when we want to limit or eliminate that type of information if it's going to have a negative impact on us as individuals on performance days. And I think that can break down, even more so to individuals on a day-to-day basis, and knowing that, yes, of course, there's a lot of information we can break down. And yes, of course, we can do all this stuff with none of this information, but let's find a sweet spot in the middle that allows us to do the things we want to do. We push when we have the opportunities to, we pull back when we have the opportunities to, and we take that information and we work on improving ourselves, right? Whether it's for performance or for general health, start tracking the information with the wearable, take it with a grain of salt, break it down, see where there are areas of opportunity where you can focus on getting better. And if you bring that intention to a wearable, they are worth it. Even if it's for a short period of time for you to get a gauge on, like for me, the quality of sleep or how early I needed to actually fall asleep, using technology to track your food, track your steps, getting a gauge on where you are as a baseline is an excellent idea, even if it's for like 30 days. Figure out what a month looks like for you, what your daily activities look like for you, how many steps you're getting on a regular basis. Start to understand those averages for yourself. And if you decide you want to keep wearing it, wearable tech all the time, that's totally up to you. But if you at least give yourself a month of getting that information and data, you'll be able to start making some informed decisions on how to improve your health. So now what I'd like to do is break down some of the feedback I got from you all on social media, through the poll that I did, and then through some of the conversations I had with individuals. So we went through a few different options on the poll, which was, what type of device you're using, or if you're not using a device at all. And then a lot of you had, great follow-up with me, and we had some good conversations around this and gave me some great insight on why you chose a certain device or why you choose not to wear a wearable device at all. So thank you all for doing that. Let's dive into it a little bit. So the first thing is for the people who responded to not using a wearable. And one of the pros that a lot of you had said for why you're not wearing a wearable tech was that you never felt the need to get a good gauge on recovery. And I think that's a really great thing for those individuals, that they're feeling really in tune and they have a good sense, or at least an honest sense, of when they are feeling well recovered and when they aren't feeling well recovered. So getting into some of the cons of wearables. So some people were saying things like they get obsessed with numbers and they felt like it would actually be more detrimental towards their overall goals. Someone else had mentioned that wearables tend to get dinged and banged up when you're using things like straps, wrist wraps, and kettlebells. Another person mentions that they don't like keeping track of stuff in general, that there's already so much information through their phone and other devices and apps and things like that, that they just felt like another layer of tracking caused more anxiety overall. So they're just avoiding that in general, which tied into what someone else said, that they're actually looking to find breaks from electronics. And so when they put their phone down, if they were wearing a wearable, like an Apple Watch, for example, they would not feel that they're getting that break because the watch is still giving notifications and all those types of things. The last thing for people who aren't wearing wearables was that it was the cost. So the cost of purchasing an Apple Watch or doing the subscription through Whoop, or the cost of the Oura Ring or whatever it was just not in their budget to spend money on that, which is totally fair. The Apple Watch is up around $400. A Whoop subscription is around $45 Canadian per month. So if you're feeling like you're not going to get the value out of a device, it makes sense that you don't want to spend the money on it. And I think if you're not totally committed to purchasing a wearable device, there is a ton of apps and a ton of features on your phone alone that give you really good sense, like steps and energy expenditure and a general estimate of how many calories you're using per day or in a workout. The only disadvantage to the cell phone is that it has to be on you all the time. And so if you're going like for a big run and you don't want it banging around in your pocket, or you're doing a workout with a barbell and you don't want to smash the barbell into your phone, that's the limitation, is the size of the phone for that type of information. And that's where some of these wearables, one, are helpful, but also, as we mentioned in some of those cons, is that they do even get in the way, even when it's a small device on your wrist or on your hand. Okay, we're going to go into the pros for the Apple Watch. This seems to be the most popular wearable device that people are using. The biggest pro that people mentioned was that it reads messages on the go, but they can also turn it off when they're exercising, so they're able to stay connected. If they're doing something like a run or they're doing a workout and they may have to get a message through to them, but they don't want to have their phone on them while they're doing it, this is a great way to just check down at your watch, see if it's the message that you're waiting for, and get back to the thing that you're trying to do. Number 2 was pairs with the phone and controls music during workouts, so you don't have to have your phone on you. You can make adjustments right on your wrist, much faster, easier to do. It's a great motivator and helps with accountability for people to get them up and get moving. This was some people who felt like they were sedentary throughout the day. It was a great way to help them check in, have their watch buzz, or just remind them to get up and get moving throughout the day. They like the idea of the closing the exercise ring as a goal each day. So something that they could check in on and see if they're making progress towards a daily goal. And also because it's customizable, they can increase it or decrease it however they need to make sure that they're having daily accomplishments and building towards more healthy habits. Some other people like the competition with friends and the reward systems. They're able to see a screen when tracking workouts, so lots of workout types to align with anything that you're doing. Other people like the versatility, improved battery life. So when we're talking about just the device itself, people like that it tracks calories, the number of times that you're getting up and moving, that it tracks your heart rate. In terms of the device, the actual comfortability of the device, and track some oddities as well. Things like irregular heartbeat, falling, any like car accidents or collisions. I have a quick little story about this. A client of mine who's very healthy, does a ton of cycling, and has a generally a healthy heart. They got a message through their Apple Watch that showed an irregular heartbeat, and when they went and got checked out, their doctor actually identified that there was an arrhythmia with their heartbeat and was able to get them, some help and medication that they needed to maintain their overall health. Some of the cons of the Apple Watch, though, is that it loses the heart rate when exercising, so it may not be the most consistent heart rate monitor. As I mentioned before, that chest monitor is going to be the most accurate one. The most common con that I see is that you have to actually set when you're doing the exercise, and a lot of people forget, or they get halfway through a workout and they're like, oh crap, I forgot to turn on my workout, and so it doesn't pick up until you actually turn that on, which some of these other devices actually do a good job of picking up that you are doing a workout, so you don't have to do it, or you can do it retroactively. And the other common con that I hear about the Apple Watch is that you can't wear it to bed. You have to take it off to charge it, so you don't get sleep data. You might get sleep time and wake time because that's when you take the watch off and put it back on, but you're not getting very good information throughout the night to see how the quality of your sleep actually was. Next, we looked at the Fitbit. The main feedback we got that was that it connects to Android, tracks your heart rate, steps, sleep quality, food, and water. So you get a little bit more in-depth in terms of like 24 hours in a day. So you don't have to charge it as often depending on which version of the Fitbit that you've got. And it can track runs and give you pace feedback. So for runners, sprinters, track athletes, that was really helpful. I used a Fitbit in the past, and I felt that was a great introduction to this type of information for me. It did give some overview in terms of sleep time and quality. Did a great job of counting steps. The one I had no screen on it, so it was pretty low profile, and everything was tracked, obviously, through the phone. You were able to see that. The next one that we talked about is the Whoop. There was a handful of people that were using Whoop in this poll, and so the main thing that people saw as pros for this was that it was very accurate for sleep. This is one of the main reasons I started wearing the Whoop, is because I wanted to see more information about how my sleep actually was going. But other people really like the diary, where you can input information for things like when you had alcohol, if you slept in the same bed, if you had coffee, if you took melatonin before sleep, and there's lots of other specific items you can select to see how they're affecting your daily recovery and your daily strain levels. So this is great if you're introducing something new into your lifestyle, whether it be a new habit or it be a new medication or something along those lines. You can really start to see, based on that journal, how it's affecting you. The next pro is that it picks up exercise without having to set it. So this is where the Apple Watch misses. The Whoop excels. So you could be starting a workout or doing a workout and finish the workout, and it will actually give you a notification and say, hey, it looks like you went for a run. You can go in, put your information in, put in a journal, do a little questionnaire, and then that way you are automatically tracking your exercise throughout the day. That goes into the strain for the day, and then you get to see if you're getting closer to your goal based on your recovery from the night before. What I really liked about the Whoop is that it sort of had this coaching element to it, and between your recovery and your strain, you had an allowance built into what you should be doing for the day based on how you recovered the night before. And I thought that was a really cool insight in terms of, one, how to improve your recovery, make sure that you're getting as much out of your recovery as you can, and then making a little bit of a smarter or more informed decision the following day in terms of how much you're going to push throughout the day. The other thing I found for myself is that I was kind of undertraining. I was really focusing on the barbell and doing a lot of strength stuff, but not realizing that I still had a lot more in my own personal tank to do more. And so that's why I introduced more running and cardiovascular work through the day, because that was a good way to help push more to my potential and not be limited by just doing stuff in the gym on its own. And I've seen other people find similar things, whether it's the information about the sleep and how to improve that, or it's about understanding more when you have the correct recovery to do more the following day. The cons for the Whoop is that it's just a strap and it doesn't have any other features, so it's very low profile. They look pretty sporty, and that may not go with your daily attire. I think the Apple Watch has become this sort of accepted accessory. People wear it with everything. They accessorize it up if they're wearing sort of more high-end clothing, and they can dress it down if you're just wearing shorts and t-shirt all the time. And I think that's where it's become or gained such popularity, is that it's now a status piece. People recognize it for what it is, and it connects to all your devices, and it gives you good insight throughout the day for these things that we're looking for in a wearable. I hope this podcast was informative for everybody listening, that you got some insight into wearable tech, that it will help you make an informed decision if you decide to continue wearing wearables or you want to get into wearing wearable tech, when you might want to use it and when you might want to avoid it. And thank you everyone who participated in the Instagram poll and had a conversation with me after to give me some more insight on why you chose the wearable that you wear or why you choose not to wear wearable tech. And thank you all for listening to this episode, and all of our other episodes you can find on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as on the 3phasefitness.ca website. For more episodes, you can subscribe on Spotify and you'll get a notification when the next one drops. Appreciate you all. Have a great day. Enjoy your health and fitness.